You know that feeling when you're standing directly in front of a massive breakthrough. You worked months for the promotion, the degree, or the business launch. The door is wide open. All you have to do is walk through it. And then, right at the finish line, you just stop. Or worse, you do something so predictably destructive that you ruin the entire thing. You pick a pointless argument with your boss. You completely miss a critical deadline. You sleep past your alarm on the morning of the big interview. When this happens, you tell yourself you were just tired. You blame bad luck or stress or timing. But deep down, you know the truth. You built the ladder rung by rung, and then you climb to the top just to saw it off from beneath your feet. The most frustrating part isn't even the failure itself, it's that you saw it coming. We've all been told that smart people win because they have the cognitive tools to solve complex problems. But nobody tells you what happens when a highly capable brain turns those exact tools against itself. There is something incredibly specific happening in your psychology when you sabotage your own progress, and it is not laziness. Once you understand the mechanics of this mental glitch, the way you look at your past failures will change completely. Let's start with how a smart brain treats safety. Your brain is a highly efficient prediction machine. It prioritizes comfort and predictability over potential growth every single time. To your evolutionary biology, familiar misery is always safer than an unfamiliar paradise. When you are struggling or working at an average level, your brain knows the rules of that environment. It knows how to survive being stuck. But success? Success is an uncharted landscape. It brings higher stakes, greater visibility, and the terrifying weight of new expectations. The moment you get close to a major upgrade, your internal alarm system goes off. It doesn't see a promotion, it sees danger. And into that exact moment of intense vulnerability, your brain hands you an exit ramp disguised as an error. You miss the flight, you forget the password, you drop the ball. It's an immediate psychological defense mechanism. Your brain isn't trying to hurt you, it's desperately trying to drag you back to the comfortable baseline it already understands. Have you ever noticed that you only seem to get careless when the stakes are incredibly high? Psychologists actually have a name for one of the primary reasons this happens. It's rooted in what researchers call the fear of discovery, or more commonly, imposter syndrome. When a smart person achieves something, they rarely attribute it to their baseline worth. They analyze the system. They think, I just prepared well this time, or I got lucky with the questions, or I managed to phrase my emails perfectly. They view their success as a beautifully performed piece of theater. And that creates an unbearable amount of tension. The higher you climb, based on what you think is a fluke, the more terrifying the eventual fall becomes. So your subconscious makes an executive decision without consulting you. It decides to control the crash. If you fail because you are fundamentally incapable, that hurts your identity forever. But if you fail because you stayed up until 4 a.m. drinking coffee and playing video games the night before the exam, you have an alibi. You can tell yourself, I didn't actually fail, I just didn't try. Sabotage is the psychological armor smart people wear so they never have to face their true limits. Think about a heavy glass vase sitting on the edge of an unstable table. If you leave it there, a random draft or a passing footprint might knock it down at any moment. The anticipation of the shatter is agonizing. Eventually, the urge to just reach out and knock the vase over yourself becomes overwhelming. At least then, the suspense is over. You chose the moment of destruction. That is exactly what your brain does when a project is going too well. It breaks the vase early just to stop the anxiety of waiting for it to drop. Now, where this gets a little uncomfortable because it hits closer to home than most people care to admit, a massive portion of chronic self-saboteurs are people who are trapped in the prison of perfectionism. While a normal person sees a task as something to finish, a perfectionist sees it as a direct reflection of their human value. If the output isn't flawless, then they are flawed. When you attach that much emotional weight to an outcome, the starting line becomes a threat. So your hyperactive self-awareness steps in. You don't just procrastinate, you over-intellectualize the delay. You tell yourself you need to read 3 more books, or clear your desk completely, or wait for the perfect seasonal window to launch. The project enters your mind and your internal critic immediately bulldozes straight over it. This is a well-documented cognitive loop. When you're anticipating your own performance under pressure, your working memory gets completely hijacked by self-monitoring. You are essentially trying to drive a car with one foot slammed on the gas and the other locked on the brake. You burn an immense amount of mental energy. The engine smokes, but you stay exactly where you are. If that sounds like your daily routine, here's the reframe. You don't have a laziness problem, you have a standards problem. Those are two completely opposite things. There is also something worth saying about the social cost of moving up, because the emotional stain of isolation is genuinely real. Growing up, you probably had a specific group of friends, a family dynamic, or a workplace circle where everyone bonded over shared complaints. You complained about the economy, the low pay, or how exhausting the daily grind was. That shared struggle was the glue that held the group together. When you suddenly begin to break away from that environment and stack visible wins, the dynamic shifts. The room gets slightly quieter when you walk in. The jokes carry a tiny edge of resentment. Having your success noticed by people who are still stuck lands like an unspoken betrayal. Your brain picks up on this shift instantly. It realizes that if you keep winning, you might lose your tribe. And the human brain does not tolerate being cast out of the tribe. So to preserve the relationships that keep you feeling safe, you quietly turn down your own light. You sabotage the next project just enough to remain relatable. You match their pace so you don't have to walk alone. This is the fundamental misunderstanding about memory and human behavior. We like to think of our minds as logical computers that always optimize for wealth, status, and achievement. But your mind doesn't care about your bank account or your job title. It stores impressions, emotional wounds, and childhood survival patterns, and it prioritizes safety ruthlessly. High visibility, stored as a threat. Disappointing someone you love, stored as danger. Standing out from the crowd, stored as a risk. Your brilliant analytical brain takes all of those historical fears and builds a highly sophisticated system of self-containment. It uses your intelligence to design the perfect cage, and because you are smart, the lock is incredibly difficult to pick. People who sabotage easily are often highly associative deep thinkers. They don't just see a step forward, they calculate 20 steps ahead, visualize every possible disaster scenario, and freeze. They see the extra taxes, the long hours, the critics on the internet, and the family strain. Their brain catalogs everything except the joy of the actual achievement. This isn't a structural flaw in your mind, it's just a particular architecture, one that is perfectly suited for survival and risk mitigation, but terribly suited for taking the blind leaps of faith that real success requires. None of this means you should just accept this pattern as your permanent identity, by the way. Lowering the stakes of your goals, treating your projects as temporary experiments rather than definitive statements of your worth, and learning to sit with the discomfort of positive momentum, these things work. They work because you are doing manually what your brain refuses to do automatically. You are teaching your nervous system that success is not a life-threatening emergency. You are constructing a little bridge between the safety of where you are now and the unfamiliar territory of who you are becoming. But the shame spiral, the quiet, low-grade belief that your self-sabotage makes you an inherently broken or disciplined person, that part is completely wrong. You are not lazy, and you are not broken. You are someone whose brain has a hyper-reactive security system that occasionally gets hijacked by its own internal weather. It is failing at the mechanical task of moving forward because it's working overtime to keep you exactly where you are safe. The sabotage was never about your lack of ability. It was always about your fear of the destination. What you are capable of achieving is still there. It has been there the whole time, waiting for you to finally tell your brain that it's okay to step through the door.